Welcome to What Do You Want to Do? The show that will hopefully help you figure out what you want to do in life or reconnect you to what you love doing. Each show has a guest who is doing what they love to do, whether it's in their career or in addition to their regular job. Most importantly, we want to help you realize that no matter your age, you too can do what you want to do if you have the will to do it. Now here's your host, Leonard Caplan.
On this show, we're going to have many guests. Some of them will be writers, musicians, actors, entrepreneurs, dancers, artists, career and life coaches, stand-up comedians, and many, many more. We'll discover how they came to their careers, some of them against many obstacles. And we'll find out how some of them actually changed their lives from being unfulfilled people to people who can't wait to get up in the morning and start doing what they love. A lot of artists face opposition from colleagues, from friends, even from family, if you can believe that. We'll find out from our guests how they overcame this, or are they still struggling with it? So stay with us, and maybe you'll find yourself somewhere in these interviews. Okay, our first guest on What Do You Want to Do is Pell Osborn, the animator extraordinaire, whom I've worked with for many years, and he's also a friend. Pell, thank you for coming and being my first guest on What Do You Want to Do?
Thanks, Len. It's a great pleasure and great honor. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I hear dogs.
I hear dogs as well.
What kind of dog you got there?
Some dog is walking by on the street. I do not know who's
Really? He sounded like he was closing in on you there for a second.
Got a good microphone.
That's right. So anyway, now that we had an official introduction by the dog as well as me, what can you tell viewers about your career? How did you get started? And I know you went to Harvard for a while.
In animation, believe it or not, they actually have a very strong animation department there. One Academy Award winner and 2 nominations have come out of that department. And a lot of people don't know that. So that's pretty interesting.
That's pretty amazing. So now your company that you founded is Motion Arts. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the things that you've done, like with ABC and these huge corporations.
Yeah, very fortunate for me. I actually got involved with the animation business because ever since a very small child, I've been very curious about the difference between animation and live action film and video. And the way I tell my students, the difference is that with video and cinema, you're basically pointing a camera at the real world and capturing stuff. And the stuff that you capture, you can then edit into whatever format or story or program you want to. With animation, it's quite the opposite. You have to create every single thing that a viewer experiences in your animation. So you're not pointing the camera at the real world at all. You're creating everything that the camera sees for every single moment that your audience is watching the project. And for me, it was really interesting time to get into animation. As I mentioned, as a very small child, I was fascinated by the difference between live action and animation. And when I was growing up in the early 1950s, television was on for only a couple of hours a day. And I would rush to the supermarket at the beginning of each week to look through the TV guide to see if perhaps that week was one of the rare times that the Disneyland TV show would be presenting an animation. And occasionally they would present excerpts from Fantasia or Pinocchio, just these amazing, fluid, amazingly organic pieces of hand-drawn animation that I never forgot. And to be perfectly honest, at the time when I was 5 or 6 or 7 years old, I had no idea how they created them. So part of my lifelong quest was to learn how that happened. I was always experimenting in my own way with animation. I grew up way outside the commercial animation field. And always liked seeing the professional animation stuff. Cinderella was one of the big ones that I remember. I probably saw it on its re-release because it was originally released in 1950. And just an amazing piece of storytelling and artwork, just still extraordinary stuff that just stays with you if you've seen that recently. Anyway, my love for animation has never flagged. I'm still fascinated by it, but there's a huge difference nowadays. And when I was growing up, it was really still easy to find a lot of experimental stuff that people were doing by hand. In the early 1950s, early 1960s, the only way to do it was by hand. And the computer didn't get involved with animation until much later, the 1990s mostly. Although when I was studying at Harvard, we had one of the very earliest Unix animation systems. It took forever to load a frame, but we would make these very short, very primitive looking nowadays animated sequences. And one of my classmates actually made a 10-second animation as a wedding present for a friend of hers. We all thought, wow, how extravagant, 10 seconds, unbelievable. And it was basically a couple of wireframe people approaching each other, and then what sort of looked like a heart appearing over their heads. I guess that implied they were in love. Anyway.
Now, I want to go back to a question that I had asked you on one of our aborted takes here.
Oh, yeah.
We had some technical difficulties earlier. When you were going to college, and specifically when you were about to graduate, how did your parents react to your declaration that you were going to be an animator?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's an enormous question. Do I even remember how they reacted? They were very supportive of anything their children wanted to do. I'm one of 5 kids, and one of my siblings is a lawyer. Another one is a professor at Babson College in Massachusetts. Another one works for the Episcopal Church. Everyone does different things. So I think my parents were open to us doing anything to make our way in the world, preferably something that we really enjoyed and were interested in. And I was definitely interested and intrigued in a number of things. Animation was one of them. Astronomy is one of them. Yeah, I suppose they were supportive is the best way I can say it, which is really great. Parents should be supportive, and I was very lucky to have supportive parents.
I agree, and they were very forward-thinking for the time, the early 50s or the mid-50s. People kind of wanted to play it safe. If you were a parent, you wanted to make sure that your children didn't starve. You know, the myth of the starving artist wasn't so much of a myth before Photoshop and before Adobe Premiere. So, you know, there's a lot of people that I know that I talk to who are in the arts had a hard time either convincing their parents that it was something that they could survive on, or in the worst case scenario, they had to leave home and prove it. So I think you got off easy in that respect.
Yeah, I think I did. And in certain ways, I wonder if that was a good thing or not. I mean, I've been very fortunate in the work that I've chosen. The last 15, 20 years of it have mostly been involved with using animation as a tool for education. I teach students how to animate by hand in a very rudimentary way, and then they create group projects about certain topics that they're studying in school or college. And because of that, we're still pretty far outside the mainstream, and our animation is quite limited. One of the things I love to do with animation is to break things down to a very simple level. It keeps it very clear, very specific what it is you're talking about. And I think animation is a great tool for simplifying. So whereas I'll refer again to Cinderella, which probably took an army of about 1,200 people to create over the course of 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I can't possibly do that given the restrictive budgets that we have these days. especially in the education field. So I'm lucky to have 30 people who can work together to produce something that's maybe 4 or 5 minutes long. And one of the things that we did that was quite successful recently was a wonderful little piece delineating the 4 geologic eras of history on the planet Earth. And I had about 25 students working on this. About 15 of them sang a song, and 8 or 9 of them actually did the animation. And the piece is called Geologic Eras Animated, and it's just about around 300,000 views on YouTube. I'm really proud of it, and every week I get a number of really nice comments from educators and students alike saying, wow, this animation really helped me learn about the geologic eras, Precambrian, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, and it's really fun when something works out that well.
With that great introduction, Pell, let's go to that animation right now.
Oh, okay.
and there you are. So,
Right.
Pal, this brings back a lot of memories because I worked with you at a summer camp for many seasons where you did just this kind of animation. And what strikes me right now is that you have to do just the opposite of what the early animators did. They were trying to get more and more complex, and you want to strip it down to their beginnings practically. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, the whole process of hand-drawn animation, unlike computer animation, is a question of keeping things simple. In the case of the animation format that we work in, we create 10 drawings for every second of time that you actually see on screen. So if you're watching 10 seconds of our animation, if we don't reuse any of the drawings, that's 100 drawings that have to be created for 10 seconds of animation. And that's a lot of work. So we need to keep it simple to make sure we can do it in the short time frame and the allotted schedule that we have to do it within the school period or the semester. So how do you make something that's both intriguing to look at and simple to make? And that's one of the things I have my students do a lot. We create storyboards before we do anything else. And the storyboards basically are big blank sheets that you fill in. They look not unlike comic book panels, and they help you figure out what it is you actually want to create in your animation. And this is one of the great things about hand-drawn animation. You want to keep it really simple, but you really need to know where you're going with it. Otherwise, you're going to be drawing all week, all month, all year.
Right.
I actually taught for about 21 years at MIT at their student art association, which is a wonderful section of the institute, where students are using all kinds of different art forms, ceramics and music and dance and film and animation to kind of regroup and reorganize themselves. It's a very high stress environment, MIT, in many ways. Anyway, we tried to break these really complex topics down, like Newton's law of gravity, or the 5 forces, or Newton's law of thermodynamics. And it was really fun to do this with people who frankly were a lot more intelligent than I am, and see their way of working. So we all learned from each other a great deal. And that's actually where we recorded this song for the geologic eras animation.
So is that an original song that was made for this project?
It's an original song that was made for another project, an oratorio about science and about evolution, that was written by a British colleague of mine, David Haynes, and it's a really wonderful oratorio. Anyhow, they performed it for the Cambridge Science Festival at MIT, and my group of students did the animation for it.
I want to talk a little bit about copyright law and how much you have to deal with it, because we've used a lot of different songs over the years in the projects that you and I have done with the kids, and I know there's a process.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to report one of my siblings is a lawyer, and it's still a serious issue. I mean, you can work for 10 years on a 5-minute long animation and get sued if you use one of the Beatles songs, for instance, and they don't want you using their songs.
Yeah.
So one of my animation colleagues, a mentor in a way, Andreas Deja, who works at the Disney Studios, he's the head animator on the character of Uncle Scar in The Lion King. After every one of his blogs or his disquisitions online, he has a little disclaimer that says this material is for informational and educational purposes only. Read more if you like. And I've been using that as well on every one of my 85 or 90 or so YouTube postings. I have this same disclaimer for informational and educational purposes only. And so far, I've been very fortunate. I've had only 1 or 2 animations in the last 20 years that have been muted because it's copyrighted material. But I have to confess, as an artist, one of the things that attracts me to make an animation about a certain topic is often the music. And sure, I wish I could write to the Beatles or to Apple Corporation and say, hey, this is a really fabulous piece of music. Okay, if we use it to explain the life cycle of a star or something like that. But unfortunately, I can't clear it with everybody. One of my colleagues at Harvard, one of my professors, Derek Lamb, who for many years was in charge of the Animation National Film Board of Canada Animation Department in Montreal, he said, you know, we're always going to have the issue of copyright with us. It's endlessly complex. If you really want to clear something for copyright and you have to use it, you better get ready for a bit of a fight each time you do it. And a perfect example that he used was a big Broadway show called Big River. Big River sounds like it could be any old river, right? But it actually was a musical retelling of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And they had to do all kinds of clearing of copyright for that because the Mark Twain estate apparently has kept up its copyright long after most copyrights die out. They keep renewing and keep renewing and keep renewing because they know what a powerful figure Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain was.
Copyright is something that we deal with video clips as well. There's certain things in, you know, you want to use some clips from a show, you got to get permission from them as well. So, you know, everybody deserves to get credit or pay.
Sure.
You know, on my wrestling show, somebody used a couple of my clips without my permission. And they you know, they notified me and they said, hey, you know, so I didn't really, it was okay by me. They gave us credit and that was it. But they should have asked first, I think. I could have, I don't know. I didn't want to make a stink about it.
Right. But it's, you know, I think it's a cordial thing to do. And wow, in this day and age, a little cordiality goes a long way, if you ask me.
Thanks for joining us on our very first show. Please join us again next week on What Do You Want to Do with Pell Osborn, Part 2.